everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast. And as the sun gleams down on the UK, the sun also shines on this podcast as we record off the back of another scintillating weekend of winning selections, not least from SBK's very own Tom Collins. And another winning nap and next best, which makes it 5 winners over the course of 3 weekends. So TC in sparkling form as he joins us from his island off the Bahamas, cocktail in hand. I assume, what? SBK studio still. How dedicated is this man to his job, working away to find more winning tips for us? I love it, TC.
Yeah, I wish I was on an island with a cocktail in hand, I have to say. Not a Tom Collins cocktail because they are disgusting. But look, back to the day job, back to grinding out those winners. I'm really looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, look, you deserve your own cocktail named after you after the last run of form. So let's see if we can keep it up. Of course, Ross is with us as well. But look, TC must say, all seriousness, you were bang on Modern Games. That must have been really satisfying. And then seeing your Nat Montasib winning well at 6-4 as well. But just all credit to that. You laid out a very clear case on why that race in America wasn't something that we should be dismissing as a flop. It was actually just tactics. And it all went according to plan in the Lockinge.
It did. To be honest, I thought he was going to be beaten around 2 furlongs out because he looked hard under the pump while the others were travelling better to his outside. But Modern Games really kicked in overdrive late on. Yes, I think too much was made about that run in the Makers Mile over at Keeneland. But there was late money for him on the exchange. He did go off favourite. So I think people came around to the idea that Modern Games was the horse to beat. And he proved them right.
They were listening to this podcast, obviously.
Of course. Who wouldn't? We keep putting up winners. Why wouldn't you listen to this podcast?
I know. You listen and you deserve to listen and then get the results. So well done to the listeners as well. But thanks to TC. I was really pleased to see Shindit coming home in second after trying to bite Modern Games when he went past him 22-1. So that was the forecast for the pod. And also La Garida finished third at 13-2. She actually runs on Saturday again. She's backing up quite quickly at Goodwood. So interested to see how she gets on after running quite an encouraging race first time out. But there are 6 flat meetings this Saturday, 2 jumps meetings. More of that a bit later maybe from Ross. But it is the Irish Guineas weekend, which we will cover. But we're going to focus on first the Group 3 Sandy Lane Stakes at Haydock on Saturday. Over 6 furlongs for the 3-year-olds, where we've got a very interesting lineup of runners. Little Big Bear comes back to sprinting trips from after that dismal, disappointing run in the 2000 Guineas. We did finish lame, but he definitely underperformed. He's got Frankie Dettori on board, which is a big jockey booking. We know that man wants to win the July Cup, so potentially if he does a good job here, that might be where they'll be rooting. Bradsell's in there, who was the Royal Ascot winner last year, his second run of this new year, along with Cold Case, looking to reverse the form from the Commonwealth Cup trial. Aldazim, Matilda Picotte, who's quite interesting, coming in off her third in the 1,000 Guineas. And the field it's an 8-runner field, which is a good betting heat. Ross, I'll start with you first, because Little Big Bear, you were strong on him for the Phoenix Stakes. You love this horse as a 2-year-old. Are you pleased to see him back to this kind of trip?
Just pleased to see him back, to be honest, Jess, because when they report they finished lame, having missed the back end of last season from a small injury, you sort of fear the worst, and it would undoubtedly be a poorer flat season if he wasn't around. But yeah, excited to see him back over this trip, and I still not discounting the fact he'll stay further, but I think now the Guineas is gone, there's no real need to stretch him out. So this looks like it will be his trip for the foreseeable future. I think it's just really straightforward. It's a 6 furlong sprint. A sprint, you want the fastest horse. He is the fastest horse by some distance. I know that Bradsell perhaps had excuses when they met in the Phoenix Stakes, but he was 8 lengths behind. Little Big Bear wasn't fully extended to win on that occasion. Bradsell, to me, at Ascot didn't look like he'd done a whole lot over the winter. I would be surprised if he's going to step forward an awful lot from his 2-year-old form. I think he's got a chance of reversing the form with Cold Case from that Commonwealth Cup trial, because I think Bradsell himself might end up back over 5 furlongs. Just looked like the 6 that Ascot perhaps stretched him on his first start. This slightly easier track might suit him, and I'm not sure it'll suit Cold Case as much. But I think Little Big Bear wins this. I think if he'd have come straight here without the poor run in the Guineas. But I mean, I think if you get kicked in the back of the leg, I think you can take a pass on that one. If he came here straight, for his first start, he'd be odds on, I think. I'm quite happy to forgive that first run. I think he'll win comfortably. Maybe Al Dazim of George Bowie's is the interesting one. Highly progressive in Maidan, didn't do anywhere near as much as most of these as a 2-year-old. Went to Maidan, won his first 3, including a Group 3. Was unlucky and perhaps didn't get the best ride when disappointing in the Group 1. Has come back, will have been freshened up. He could be interesting at a bigger price, but I also wonder whether this might just be a springboard onto better things later in the season for a pretty shrewd operation.
So 9-4, which you could get for Little Big Bear. Do you think that's a good value for a horse who showed to be the best in this division as a 2-year-old? Or and one of my concerns is that he had an issue after the Phoenix Stakes. He was lame after the back of the Guineas. There could be a bit of fragility there. There's a slight hanging concern over that point in my mind.
Yeah, possibly, but I think if he didn't have those, he'd be odds on. I think they're two separate issues, as I understand. It was a muscle strain, and the fact he pulled a shoe off, and they lost part of his hoof after the Phoenix Stakes. And as I understand it, in Newmark, he just got struck into, and that's sort of a cut injury that needs repairing. The bigger concern for me would be how much time has he missed to come to this. But at the same time, an operation such as Aidan O'Brien's, they're not going to stick him on the plane. I assume it will be this time, having had to be the ferry last time. Stick him on a plane, come over. I just think he's got everything going for him, and you're really trying to find holes in him if you're trying to get him beat, I think. Okay,
yeah, it's a very important sort of moment in time for the Ballydor operation, isn't it? Like, we're really trying to sort out their 3-year-olds. Like, is this going to be a 10 Sovereign style horse that's going to dominate the sprinting divisions? What is happening to all their 3-year-olds? Auguste Rodin's going to prove himself in the Derby next week. Can we believe that the Guineas was a non-event and these are really magical horses? Or they've got to prove themselves now. TC, do you think it's that straightforward for Little Big Bear? Like, the competition there it's healthy, it's good. Cold Case, look, for me, he looks like the really straightforward one. He's had no issues. He's grown. Carlbert said he wasn't even 100% there going to Ascot, but for some reason he's below in terms from a betting perspective. Bradsell, who we beat, and Little Big Bear, who's got a few questions to answer.
Yeah, so I think there are interesting horses in the race. I mean, Cold Case, as you've already touched on there, is the solid option. His main asset is stamina over this trip, and he was really good last time at Ascot. I think he's going to be there or thereabouts. You can pretty much bank on that. Bradsell travelled better than him at Ascot, but then didn't hit the line as powerfully. Ross said that Ascot's stiff track might have been the reason, and I agree with that, as well as the fact he probably wasn't 100%. I think those two will finish virtually next to each other. And Al Dassim is very interesting coming back against his own age group on UK soil. But I just couldn't get away from Little Big Bear. I really couldn't. Hayden O'Brien's Sizable Colt was the clear standout of these as a 2-year-old. He bolted up in the Windsor Castle. He bolted up in the Anglesey. And that victory in the Phoenix Stakes, no horse in here could run anything like that. He earned a speed figure that was one of the best 2-year-old speed figures from a sprinting perspective that we've seen in a number of years, and an official rating of 124. No horse is close to 124. Now, you do have to put a line through the Guineas form, as we've already touched on, but I think that's quite easy to do. Sometimes things just don't go right for horses. He had clear excuses. It's not like we're making up a reason here. There was early scrimmaging. He got struck into. He probably didn't want the soft ground anyway. He probably doesn't want the mile. I believe he will stay it, but he was a star sprinter last year. If he returns to his 2-year-old form, especially that Phoenix Stakes victory, 9-4 would be incredible value in this race.
And don't forget, he was backed, wasn't he, in the Guineas? Like they definitely fancied him, and there was a point where we thought, is Ryan going to choose a Little Big Bear over Auguste Rodin? I think it was quite a close call. So I think they've got a lot of faith in this horse. It's not the fact that he hasn't trained on or whatever it is. You know, they have to go for classics to see who might be able to stretch out their stamina. Okay, it seems like a very confident vote from TC and Ross for Little Big Bear. I just think that the straightforward one, as I've said all along, is Cold Case. I like what he did at Ascot. Just watching that race, you can see the size of Bradsell. He's not grown into a proper 3-year-old whereas Cold Case really has. He's a horse that Carl Burke's always rated very highly. His horses are going very nicely. And I just think at the prices, he just represents a little bit more value at around 4-1. So I'm willing just to side with him. But Little Big Bear, I wouldn't be surprised if he struts his stuff and shows what he's really made of in this Sandy Lane Stakes. So Frankie Dettori's on board, as we mentioned. That's because Ryan Moore and a lot of the other number one jockeys from Ballydoyle are going to be at the Curragh for the Irish 2000 Guineas. And it's Guineas weekend. It's the Irish 1,000 Guineas as well on the Sunday, but we've got our decks out for the 2,000 Guineas and a late supplementary of Royal Scotsman, third in the Newmarket 2,000 Guineas for Paul and Oliver Cole, comes into this race now with Jamie Spencer on board. We'll remember that he won this race on Phoenix of Spain all those years ago. We've got High Royal, who was second in the race, much shorter price than he was when he was second at 125-1. And then we've got some Aidan O'Brien runner in Paddington, who's a bit of a dark horse, really. We don't know what his limits are, whether he's definitely a miler is my question around him. Proud and Regal for Donncha O'Brien, Galeron for Charlie Hills, Cairo for Aidan O'Brien as well. Ross, I'll come back to you first. There's a good, healthy blend of Irish and UK runners, and it's no foregone conclusion for the Aidan O'Brien types. Again, I'm not sure how good or strong they are, and I'm not surprised to see Royal Scotsman at the top of the betting list here.
No, I mean, you take him out of it, and it's a really poor affair, isn't it, on what they've done so far, albeit they're 3-year-olds. You know, a lot of them have got pedigrees that suggest they should be progressive. But, I try really hard not to just bob up favourites consistently, but I just think Royal Scotsman is really hard to get away from here. What he did in the Guineas, I think he was the second best horse in the Guineas. I don't think you can say that Geraldine was anything but a deserving winner, but he was far too keen out the gate. Jim Crowley, I think, was really unfortunate, and he made a number of decisions, and you could see that he was making them for absolutely the right reason, and every single one of them just backfired. He tried to jump out and get handy and get a nice position. The horse was very keen, so he tried to come in behind, get a bit of cover, and the one in front sort of took a pull, and he got caught on heels, got bumped around. Royal Scotsman, I watched it back this morning, he pulled far too hard for at least 3, maybe 4 furlongs, and he was still one of only 2, the winner included, that finished his race off. I thought it was a massive run. I think he's going to be better on this ground. I think Jamie Spencer is a good booking, as not to take away from Jim Crowley, but if you can't get Jim Crowley, Jamie Spencer, I think, has got as much chance of anyone as settling this horse. I expect him to drop out. It's a slightly smaller field than at Newmarket. I think better ground is going to suit. There's a slight concern that this is an afterthought in that he was supplemented on Monday. I'm never a massive fan of horses with that. So that was sort of the starting point for me was, right, this is an afterthought. How do I get him beat? But the more I looked, I just couldn't. I think Paddington is by Sayuni out of a mare who definitely wanted softer ground. I think he's probably a 10 furlong horse in the making as well. I think Cairo wants further. Ace of Kings from Aidan O'Brien just doesn't look good enough. And Proud and Regal from Donncha O'Brien has already shown that he's got the stamina for 10 furlongs. I just think on a fairly quick test on good ground, Royal Scotsman's got everything going for him, other than they obviously haven't had this at the front of their mind. I mean, it might well have been they've just made a plan, I think, to go to Ascot, and then he's been so well. And I think they said he worked particularly well on Monday morning. So yeah, it's hard to get away from, I think, really. I wouldn't be surprised if actually the first 3 were from the Guineas, Royal Scotsman, High Royal, and Galeron. I think Galeron is, a decent yardstick, and I just wonder that the Irish horse can be quick enough.
Yeah, the Coles probably saw the lineup of horses and thought, oof, we could win that. You touched on High Royal, and because you've gone through a lot of them, what do you make of that? Do you think he was flattered, or do you think he's this a talented horse and we haven't seen the best of him?
No, I think he's a talented horse. I just think he probably, alongside the winner, got the best ride in the race. I thought Oisin Murphy rode all his fractions perfectly, made use of what he had. And, in hindsight, by virtue of being ridden prominently, you avoided a lot of the scrimmaging that affected a number of them in behind. I would be confident that Royal Scotsman is a significantly better horse than High Royal over this trip on good ground.
Yeah, Oisin Murphy retains the ride with so many race meetings over the course of the weekend, especially rides for his boss Andrew Balding. I thought that was very interesting that he's over there. We know how hungry he is for classic winners, already achieving it with Morge. Yeah, I think I completely agree with Ross. I think Royal Scotsman is the best horse in this race. So I can't really get too excited by the others. They weren't good enough for the UK Guineas for the Ballyjoul team, and some of them are very unexposed. The Jessica Harrington horse, Car Shamar's a winning maiden, patchy enough form. Are we missing something here, TC?
I don't think so. I'm going to put up a horse that's not Royal Scotsman, though I do believe Royal Scotsman is the horse to beat. He's undoubtedly the horse to beat, in fact. He ran the best race in the Guineas. There's no point in me going through exactly what Ross and yourself have said, but he should reverse the form with High Royal. I like the booking of Jamie Spencer. The only two negatives, or maybe not even negatives, but slight downsides or worries I have about Royal Scotsman. One, I don't love the draw. You tend to want to be drawn lower at this track. If you look back in the last 10 years, stalls 1 to 4 have dominated, much like higher draws have dominated in Sandy Lane, by the way. Little Big Bear is drawn 7 of 8 in that. I forgot to cover that at the time. So he's drawn in stall 7, which is slightly further out. But if Jamie Spencer is going to hold him up and go right to the back of the pack, then he should be able to get a nice toe towards the far side rail anyway. And the only other thing I don't love is his price, because he's 9 to 4. It is an afterthought. I think there are a couple of maybe flies in the ointment in here. And I'd rather find one at value price, because I'm taking the short price on Little Big Bear. So I'm going to go with Aidan O'Brien because he's got such a good record in the race. And I think the value lies with Cairo, not Paddington. The mount of Wayne Lorden rather than Ryan Moore. Now, when I watched the races back from Paddington, I thought he just didn't bother stretching out. The horse is right upright. He doesn't stick his neck out. He doesn't look like he's really giving 100%. And he also likes soft ground, as you've touched on. So I'm quite surprised that Ryan's chosen Paddington. He also has to improve a great deal on what he's shown so far to even be competitive in this race. We're looking a stone on official ratings to get competitive with Royal Scotsman. Whereas Cairo showed a good level of form at 2. From a range of trips, he finished second over 6 furlongs first time up, so it does have speed. And then he won over a mile, won over 7 furlongs, sorry. And then this season, when he came back at Dundalk, he won over a mile, stayed the trip nicely. And then he went to Meydan and quite clearly did not handle the dirt track there, hated the kickback, didn't perform as many anticipated as he was sent off market leader. I'll put a line through that. Much like we put a line through Little Big Bear's run in the Guineas, Cairo would be second or third favourite in this race. He'd come into the race with a real good CV, highly consistent performances. Ryan Moore would probably be riding, so I don't understand why he's 12 to 1. I'll take Cairo each way, though I do understand that Royal Scotsman is the horse to beat.
Yeah, he's got all that dirt pedigree, doesn't he? He's got by a dirt sire. They probably were testing it to see if they could be creative with him.
Exactly. They were probably testing to see if he was like Mendelssohn a few years back and he could go over to the US, but he just hated the kickback. It's different from horse to horse, isn't it? And if you swallow a load of dirt when you're running, this is not going to be, it's not going to see a horse achieve their peak performance. Mendelssohn, what was so good about him 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever he ran in the Kentucky Derby and whatnot in the US, was that he had that early speed that many horses over here don't have. So he could get out into a nice rhythm, into some clear air and perform as his pedigree suggests he should on dirt. Cairo doesn't have that early speed from the outset, and he found himself right in the middle of the pack and just got so much kickback. I think you could just put a line through that. And on turf form and that Dundalk effort, he's probably a player in here.
Okay, and he's 14 to 1, as you say.
Exactly.
It's an open enough betting race. Royal Scotsman, they always said, Paul Cole said to me, cover. That is what Royal Scotsman needs. But I made note of that draw angle as well. 3 of the last 4 winners come out of draw 1. Siskin was out of 2. So Royal Scotsman, who was drawn on the wrong side in the 2,000 guineas at Newmarket, I wasn't that sure if 7 was the right or the wrong place either, but it doesn't seem like the ideal position. But let's hope it's not too much of a bias like it was at Newmarket. Okay, we've spun through the Irish 2,000 guineas and the Sandy Lane at Haydock. What we all want to hear is the naps and the next best, as they were so fruitful and they have been over the last few weeks. As mentioned, there's so much racing over the course of Saturday and also Sunday, and there's also a bit of jumps as well. And I know Ross has got something to tell us from a stat perspective. He's shaking his head at me.
We're going to keep it back, Jess. We're going to keep it back. tune in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, is he? Maybe you're not even jumping this weekend either. What are you doing for us?
No, I'm sticking to the MO. I'm not doing a Tom Collins through the winter where I dive over to the all weather. I'm sticking to.
Don't pretend you're doing it just because you want to be that person. You're doing it because you actually enjoy it. We know.
Okay. No, I am sticking to the flat with both NAP and Next Best. The NAP is at 5:00 at York, the Ed Bethel train, Yorkshire. I mentioned a couple of weeks back that I'd spoken to Ed Bethel at the back end of last year and asked for a couple of 2-year-olds that he was yet to run that he was excited about. He mentioned James McHenry, who did us a good turn 2 weeks ago. And he mentioned this horse, and he said he was very excited to see him out as a 2-year-old, but whatever he did as a 2-year-old, he would step forward as a 3-year-old because he was trying to buy 3-year-old types at this stage of his training career. Yorkshire came out and made a really pleasing debut over 6 furlongs when finishing third at Haydock. Got hampered early, finished really well. Then won over 6 furlongs at Haydock. Had a winter off, came back, made a pleasing return over 6 at Southall, where he got up in the dying strides over 6, and was then really unlucky, I thought, last time to get chinned on the line at Southall by Mustajer. I think he's got a mark of 87 now. I think back on turf, he's got loads of upside. Ed Bethel's going along really nicely. I think he brings his horses through quietly. I'd be massively surprised at the end of the year Yorkshire isn't rated higher than 87. Now, whether it's this weekend, I hope it is. I think Yorkshire going to York, can't ignore that line. Didn't look a deep race in my mind, and I think off bottom weight, he's got a great chance. Then the Next Best is also another 3-year-old who caught my eye as a 2-year-old last year. The Paul and Oliver Cole trained Wyoming, who runs in the 420 at Goodwood. She was really impressive as a 2-year-old. Won on debut at Windsor, and then chased home the 95 rated Cristellium at Newbury. That was a really impressive run. Went back to Newbury, and I think the soft ground there just bogged it down. It was right at the end of the year, and with fillies in particular, I'm always keen to give them a pass if they perform badly, because they can be changing in their coat. The cold weather can get to them a bit more than the colts. Cristellium was rated 95, and it has got a decent level of form. I think it's really notable that they step her up here off bottom weight up to 1.4 miles straight away. The dam didn't do anything until she went over this trip, so Wyoming is already ahead of her. She's by motivator, suggests she wants a trip as well. It's a full stamina pedigree, and I just think she's going to take all the beating.
Okay, 2 very comprehensive cases for the NAP and the Next Best. Yorkshire, I remember seeing him as big, physical-looking, imposing sort. So, it looks like that classic better as a 3-year-old type for Ed Bethel, who is flying. Thanks for that, Ross, as you continue to adore the flat over this summer period. TC, the man of the moment, take it away.
Yeah, so you said there's lots of racing this weekend, and obviously there is. I just found it difficult to find a couple of real proper bets. Like last week, the Nap Montasib, I was super confident about, and I couldn't believe the opening price. But this week, my 2 selections are both horses that have shown promise in recent starts. I'm not going to say they're ridiculously confident, but I'll give them out as a Nap and Next Best anyway. My Nap comes in the 220 at Chester. It's a 7.5 furlong novice event. There are no prices as of yet, but from what I can tell, it's going to be a match between William Haggis's debut winner Orchid Bloom and the Andrew Balding trained Al Sakib, and it's the latter who's my pick in the race. I think he'll probably open second favourite behind the Haggis trainee. It'll be interesting to see what price, because he could become a proper bet in here. Al Sakib is a son of Kingman, and he's a half-sibling of 3 group winners, one in Australia, one in the US, and one in the UK, which was Nialetti, who was a super talented and game and gutsy performer for Mark Johnson. So he's bred to be really good. Al Sakib showed plenty of ability on his debut. He was sent off favourite at Kempton for that, which I think is notable, given Andrew Balding doesn't have an amazing strike rate with first-time outrunners. He showed good gate speed to bounce out from stall 3, grab the rail, sit prominently. The race was won by an Archie Watson trainee called O Knight, who had already won before and had 2 previous starts, so had the benefit of experience, which Al Sakib didn't have. But all the way to the line, Al Sakib was making ground up on O Knight, and that form was given a boost by the 4th winning since. And Al Sakib was 2.5 lengths clear of the 3rd, who was further clear of the 4th. So it looked a pretty good race, and I thought Al Sakib ran a very nice debut there. Now, he's definitely going to stay this slightly longer trip. There's no doubt about that on pedigree. And I really think Chester will suit, given he looks a well-balanced and agile type. He's drawn in stall 4, which is ideal. 3 places inside the other likely market protagonist, Orchid Bloom. And Andrew Baldwin has an excellent record with 3-year-olds at Chester, 22% in his career. So Alsa Kid will be the nap in the 220. And then the next best, I'm heading to Salisbury on Saturday, so I looked at the Salisbury card in depth. And the 740 stands out, a horse called Climate Precedent. Now, this homebred gelding showed promise in 3 novice runs last year. Didn't win in any of them, but made good middle moves before flatting out. He just looked a rather weak individual. But he did finish 5th in a good race, won by the highly talented and 101 rated King of Steel at Nottingham. And he was heavily punted on his comeback after a gelding operation, after a winter break, when he ran in 2 handicaps. Made nice moves again in both of those races. First time up, didn't seem like he stayed the mile 3 furlongs, first off the layoff at Southwell. And then the time after that, he just got out-battled in a real duel to the line by a John and Thady Gosden trainee, and the pair drew miles clear. They dropped him back to a mile when last seen in a race that developed into a sprint. 2 things that probably went against him. He doesn't want a mile and he doesn't want a race to turn into a sprint. So he ran very well, given he finished 5th that day and wasn't beaten too far. And I think the winner in the second, Totness, and I can't remember the horse who finished his second name, but I think they're both pretty decent. The step back up to mile 2 should definitely help his cause. Billy Lochnane's been booked. That's a huge positive, as everyone already knows. And Michael Bell has a 23% strike rate with 3-year-olds at Salisbury in the last 5 years. So Climate Precedent in the 740 will be my next best.
Okay, brilliant. And enjoy Salisbury. Hopefully it's nice sunny for you. As I mentioned, I think there's a lot of racing. There's just lots of interesting horses I'm looking forward to seeing out again. And I said last week that I wasn't going to put up another 2-year-old unless they won, and I'm not going to. But La Garida, who I did put up, is running again this weekend, which I think is well worth watching. Also, The Line, who was quite an eye-catching horse of Richard Hannon's, runs at York on Saturday. Ross is nodding, that's relief. So just 2 to note from the juveniles sections, but I'm not going to go for them. I'm going to go for a couple of others at Goodwood. Now, I was fortunate enough to go to James Horton's yard 10 days ago, I think it was, to go and catch up with the team and see what was going on. And they didn't really know then, but now they do know more now. They're able to run the horses under a new name. It's under the stud that is connected to John and Jess Dance, but beside the point, they have some fantastically exciting horses. So regardless of what's going on, their horses are well worth watching, and they're going to send out plenty of them over the course of the weekend. That first run is since the end of April. They might be very fresh, but they look sparkling. And the one horse that James Horton was most excited about seeing was Phantom Flight, who's a real favourite and a yard flag bearer. You'll remember that he won at the Ebor Festival, the final race of the Ebor Festival. We bolted up and beat Spirit Dancer. His return run in the Magnolia Stakes, where he was 3rd to Fox's Tails, he said he was a bit unlucky. I'm not sure if he was really, but I think it wasn't. I think it was a good starting point for this horse. He does come up against Francesco Clemente, who he's unbeaten for John and Thady Gosden. He looks like an absolute freak, but I think he might have been a bit flattered winning that Newmarket handicap, beating a horse called Miramachi, who I think has been beaten about 7 times since that race. So I'm happy to take that on, and I'm excited to see Phantom Flight for that James Horton yard. He'd be one of my selections for the weekend, along with Harry Brown in the 455 at Goodwood, a horse that I followed throughout the winter months for Dave Simcock, where Dave Simcock had a bit of a purple patch over at Linkfield and the likes, and I'd imagine TC would have noticed it as well. He had some nice horses running out. I haven't seen this horse since February. His form's working out all right. I don't think it's the deepest of handicaps at Goodwood. He does have to shoulder top weight. Hayley Turner's back on board again, but I like the son of Harry Angel, and I think the connections think that he could be better than this rating, and there could be a little bit more room for improvement. So Harry Brown and Phantom Flight on a busy weekend across the country and over in Ireland as well. So as always, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I hope we found a few more winning naps and next best for you as TC continues to study hard after what's been a wonderful few weeks. A reminder that new SBK customers can get £30 in free bets by betting £10. So enough in the bank, in the pocket to spend on some of the tips that we've thrown out for the weekend. T's and C's always apply. We are getting closer to Royal Ascot, and we will have a Royal Ascot preview coming up. So make sure you subscribe to all of our podcast channel, but make sure that you get onto YouTube as well, as we've got loads of content there, especially from some of our ambassadors and the likes of George Burby, and that is not to be missed based on what we've been seeing recently, especially that freak of a 2-year-old that went out and won on Sunday. So plenty more for you to read and to watch. Thank you to TC and to Ross, and we'll see you next week.